Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today we're going to be talking about the crossing of the Delaware. Now, today's Christmas Eve, so happy holidays, and technically the crossing of the Delaware was on Christmas, so I'm a day early, but I was just so excited to get to this story, because we're not talking about George Washington. Actually, we're talking about John Glover. Now, when we think of the crossing of the Delaware, we like to think of that painting that came 50 or so years later of George Washington on a boat leading the army across the Delaware River. And while there is some truth to that idea, George Washington didn't lead the men across the Delaware. He ordered someone to get the boats and have us cross the Delaware. And that man was John Glover. So we're going to talk a little bit about him. John Glover was a self-made man in Massachusetts. He came from a poor family and started as a shoemaker, a cobbler as they were known then, and then he became a fisherman and saved up his money and he bought a boat. And then he saved up more money and got some more boats and became a successful merchant. He's a real Horatio Alger, Ben Franklin style rags to riches kind of guy. So when the revolution breaks out, Glover signs up and he's elected to a colonel of his regiment. Now, the men he were leading were mostly former fishermen and sailors, and they became known as the Amphibious Regiment. So the Amphibious Regiment, having been mostly sailors and such, they were part of the Massachusetts militia, but when the war moved to New York City, his regiment was assumed into the Continental Army. And after the disastrous loss at the Battle of Brooklyn, or Battle of Long Island, or Battle of several names that it has, when they evacuated by boat in the fog to get past the British, John Glover was the man tasked with collecting the boats and getting the army on the boats and across the water. So, several months later, August to December, 4 or 5 months, when George Washington wanted to cross the icy Delaware, who did he turn to? John Glover, the man who had already helped him cross the waters with an army. And Glover, again, found some boats through various means. He went and, took them from civilians and built some of them and things of that nature. And unfortunately, it was very icy, and Glover was only able to get about half the army across the water before it was time to attack. That being said, he did get half the army across the water, and what followed were the very important battles of Trenton and Princeton, where morale, which had been sagging, was bolstered because of these stunning victories the Continental Army suddenly had. And John Glover, as the man who literally got them to the battle, he deserves a lot of the credit for this. Glover, of course, he would soon thereafter, about a month later, Glover resigned from the Continental Army. His wife was sick and he had business to attend to at home. But the Continental Congress appointed him as a brigadier general, which is a huge honor. But Glover didn't think he was up to the task. He didn't have faith in his own qualifications, and he wrote to George Washington turning down the position. And he said, "I could wish myself qualified, but when I consider my own inabilities and inexperience, I cannot think myself in any degree capable of doing the duty." So George Washington was not the type of guy who liked to get turned down. So he wrote back to Glover, complimenting him and saying, you're good at this. Yeah, buck up, bro. Yeah. But he also reprimands him at one point, and Washington says to Glover, "Our enemies count upon the resignation of every officer of rank at this time as a distrust of and a desertion from the cause, and they rejoice accordingly." Basically, Washington was saying, the Redcoats want you to resign. They want all of our officers to resign. The fact that you're not going to accept this position makes them very, very happy. You're doing them a service. And Glover promptly returned to the Continental Army and assumed the rank of Brigadier General, at which he performed admirably. Not a lot of noteworthy events after this. That's, the crossing of first the Hudson and then, or the East River, and then the Delaware are his big moments. There's one other thing I did want to mention about Glover, is Glover had a ship named the Hannah. And while they were still back at Boston, when he was still a lowly colonel, just running the amphibious regiment, not that colonel's lowly, that was a joke, when he was running the amphibious regiment, Washington hired the Hannah as a privateer ship for the Continental Army. Of course, privateering is basically piracy that's done with a letter of marque that says, the government says you can be a pirate. Now, this was the first time the Continental Army had hired a privateer ship, so there is an argument to be made that John Glover's ship, the Hannah, was the first ship in the American Navy. Now, like I said, there's an argument to be made. First of all, there are many ships that try and claim this title, and most of them have a right to claim it. It's a stiff competition. One of the things that holds the Glover back is it wasn't in the Navy, it was a privateer ship, hence private is the key operative word there. So, probably not the first boat in the Navy, but a candidate for it. So that's the story of John Glover. I'm going to call it for today. I hope you have a happy holidays and everyone gets all the presents and eggnog their heart's desire. I am going to go. I am going to make a video for you tomorrow, probably very brief. And that's it for today. Again, happy holidays, and I will see you tomorrow.